The business of media in this country will never be the same again.
Reliance Industries and Walt Disney Company coming together to create a strategic joint venture of a media and entertainment company in the country, which is worth $8.5 billion.
Reliance Industries, the holding company, will invest another 11,500 crore rupees into this particular company,
providing entertainment and sports content to over 750 million viewers.
120 television channels, including Colors and Star Plus and Star Sports, Nickelodeon and MTV and all of these.
Reliance Industries is going to own 16.34% in this joint venture. 46.82% will be held by Viacom 18 and 36.84% by Disney.
An $8.5 billion entity in a $25 billion market. The biggest media company ever created in the country with absolute dominance in broadcast and streamed television, and an almost monopolistic control over sports coverage. The announcement of the merger came days after the failure of another, Sony Pictures formally withdrawing its merger proposal with Zee Entertainment. It comes at a time when media consumption in the country is changing very fast. Indian viewership is fast moving from pay TV to CTV or connected TV. Content costs are rising, the advertising market is becoming more and more unpredictable, and the viewer is getting more and more demanding. For Reliance, which is the OG of business disruption, it is a way of extending a market supremacy that started with and is closely linked to its leadership in the telecom sector. For Disney, it's a way of tailoring its presence in a market it can no longer afford, but neither give up. With its world of streaming and broadcasting content, Disney catapults Reliance from 4th position to number 1 in the industry. But it also brings its fair share of challenges, primarily expensive sports streaming and broadcasting contracts. And of course, before the deal consummates, it'll face intense scrutiny from India's competition watchdog, obviously because of the inordinate control the entity gets over the country's media landscape. So what shape will the Reliance-Disney partnership take, and how will it reshape India's media industry? We discuss all this and much more in today's episode. It's Tuesday, the 5th of March. From the Economic Times, I'm Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief.
Reliance entered the picture literally in September.
That's my colleague and TMB co-host, ET's Deal Tracker-in-Chief, Arijit Barman.
And by end February, we have a $8.5 billion merger, stock and cash, to create India's largest media company. So it's record speed, something that only Reliance, A, can do. B, it also shows Disney wanted a solution for India in a hurry, because globally they were facing significant headwinds ever since Bob Iger came back, because it's been a bloated organization, several verticals, from amusement parks to television to sports to streaming platforms, linear TV, and that meant very high costs. COVID hit them badly. All film studios got hit badly. Nobody went to the amusement parks. The writers in Hollywood went on a strike, so there was no content even for OTT. So most media companies in America were bleeding, Disney being one of the largest and one of the most bloated, bled the most. So therefore, they needed a solution.
And so the background to this move in India is Disney starting to think carefully about its global business model and thinking carefully about which territories it can make money in the short to medium term on a sort of investor level, rather than thinking about expanding the Disney Plus product to be a one-size-fits-all product on a global scale.
And that's Daud Jackson, a media analyst with London-based consultant Omdia. As Daud told me, Disney CEO Bob Iger has been consistently telling investors that the company will have a more tailored approach in some markets.
And I think India is one of those. And the tailoring that they decided was that they couldn't do the job as well as Reliance could in this period. Obviously, it's possible to see India as a critical market in the future, but in the short term, India is not a huge market in terms of the revenue of a company like Disney. And I think that's one of the realizations that it's come to. The cost that you pay is for future market position. According to figures from Omdia, in 2023, India accounted for about 2% of global online video and pay TV subscriber revenue. So while on the one hand, it's obviously got the potential to be one of the very largest markets in the world globally, if I was talking about 2023, I'm talking about the scale that activist investors work on, then India is a long way in the distance on that front.
In India, Disney has had a long checkered history that started with a venture with KK Modi in 1993. In 2019, after many partnerships and purchases and pullbacks, Disney got Star as part of a massive $71 billion merger with Rupert Murdoch's 21st Century Fox. The deal, as far as India was concerned, made Disney the king of sports broadcasting. But that leadership position has been an expensive one to maintain. You see, Disney has been paying more than it can afford for rights to show sports events on paid and streamed television. Most recently, the $3 billion that it paid for renewing the ICC cricket rights. India has been pinching Disney for a very long time. But of course, there's never been any question of leaving the market.
They did not want to exit India. In India too, they had linear TV, which is Star TV and the other affiliate networks. They have OTT, which is Disney plus Hotstar. Now, nobody was giving them a solution which could give them a holistic answer. But here was Reliance, who was willing to take the good with the not so good. When I say not so good, I mean the linear TV, which is peaking out and is degrowing or is being flattish. Reliance, mind you, was not the first choice. Blackstone was, because the key executives who left Disney but were brought back by Iger to help him revive Disney, they left Disney to start a company called Candle, which is a media company. Candle was backed or bankrolled by Blackstone. So obviously their first pit stop was Blackstone, and Blackstone was already, experimented or scoped out several Indian media assets. But Blackstone was not convinced about the vast empire of Disney, and the drag was the linear part of it, which is the terrestrial TV or linear TV, the channels that we know. And then came Reliance.
Reliance, India's most valuable conglomerate with a 20 trillion rupee market cap, believes in entering businesses only to disrupt them and control them. Most recently, it's done so with the telecom sector, and so media was the most natural pivot. Because telecom and media mean data. And if there's anyone who understands the power of data, it's Mukesh Ambani.
Data is indeed the new oil, but this new oil is fundamentally different from traditional oil. Traditional oil was extracted at select places. Thus, it created wealth only for a few countries. In contrast, the new oil, that is data, can be generated and consumed everywhere and by everybody. It has the potential to create value equitably across sectors, across geographies, and across economic classes.
Reliance is very clear. It sees itself as a digital company. Even in telecom, it sees itself as a digital telecom company. So you add the pineapples, the tomatoes, the caramelized onion or whatever. So those are the value-added services, and you can charge them. You can charge the extra, which you couldn't have if you were offering plain vanilla telecom services, because that's more like a commodity service.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very fair to say that the entity will exercise, for want of a better word, inordinate control over the media business in India. How do you think in the next few years the business will completely be reshaped, 3 or 4 ways in which it'll completely change with the entry of this entity?
This might take a little bit of time because I see 3 or 4 key things, as you said. Number one, scale. Let's look at some of the numbers. 40% viewership share in linear TV and 50% plus in digital, because you're combining JioCinema and Disney Hotstar, which is by far the largest streaming platform in the country. Together, the JV will have 750 million viewers across India. That's a massive number. The JV also says that the combined entity will have the exclusive rights to distribute Disney films and productions in India, which has a license to more than 30,000 content assets. 30,000. That's a humongous access to a century-old content library, from cartoons to Star Wars.
And then there's sports.
It's almost going to be a monopoly on Indian cricket. The IPL digital rights are with JioCinema. IPL TV rights are with Star. Now they are under the same tent. ICC digital rights are also with Disney and Hotstar, right? One is IPL, the other is ICC. ICC's TV rights are also with Star, which was earlier sub-licensed to Z, but that's getting into a legal tussle. The BCCI media rights are with Viacom 18. So, I would say the biggest loser perhaps is going to be BCCI, because earlier they could put Reliance versus Star, and you saw what happened in the IPL bidding auction, right? It almost went for $6 billion for this last 2023 and to 2027 cycle. People would say, they overbid. And because Reliance also started showing those IPLs for free. So it has the money power to sustain this, but Disney bled, right? Now, here, when you have both these players together, I wonder how, the Board of Cricket Control in India will maximize the moolah for themselves. Unless, of course, you have newer players. The media landscape is always evolving, and you have newer players coming in and who are digital players largely, who might come in and be aggressive competitors or aggressive bidders. Some of them, like an Amazon or even Netflix, has got into sports, mind you. So you don't know. Maybe in the next cycle of IPL, you can have a Netflix or an Amazon come in and, offer counter bids. But don't forget, now this combination will also have marquee sports assets such as Pro Kabaddi League. It will have the Indian Super League, those who like Indian football. English Premier League, that's going to be with them too. NBA, basketball, so the younger audience. English Premier League means the urban SECA, the urban creme de la creme. Also, they have Olympics, the rights to stream or broadcast Olympics. Is there anything left in sports? I doubt it.
All of this will have massive implications on financials, of course. The revenues will be huge, but the expensive bits that Arijit mentioned will continue to be a drag on the earnings for a while. Consultancy firm Media Partners Asia estimates that for FY24, the combined entity will generate $2.8 billion in revenue, more than a fourth of the industry's combined revenue. But it will lose $200 million in EBITDA. What do these estimates take into account? A profitable combined TV entertainment business with an estimated EBITDA profit of $600 million. A sports television business which will lose $600 million, and a streaming business which, while it's growing, will lose $150 million. All of this in FY24. But then there's a huge upside in one aspect: advertising.
I would presume, or I won't be surprised if advertising rates go up by a quarter with fewer players having greater bargaining power for the advertisers, for the bang for the buck. So bad news for an HUL, bad news for an ITC, or any of the large big spenders, or all the fintechs, or the Dream 11s of the world who sponsor big time during IPL, auto companies who are big auto FMCG, financial services companies who advertise a lot on the visual medium, which is television and video.
Here's Dawood again.
I think ultimately the success of this entity in the next 5 to 10 years will be from attracting not just really big advertisers, but expanding the pool of potential advertisers and getting more and more SMEs into its pipeline. If you look at the big US tech giants, one of like Meta and Google, one of the bedrocks of their overall financial success has been attracting SME clients. And I think that one of the challenges for this combined entity will be its ability to attract a wider range of advertisers to its platforms. As you see more and more viewing in India happening through connected TV and smart devices, it puts a newfound emphasis and a new ability to target customers more specifically. So if I'm a banqueting hall in Nashik, then now I can target my customers in one particular market rather than having to be in a business that can operate across India or across a whole region. So those smaller businesses have the capacity to really target customers, and being able to connect and provide workable solutions to those customers is, I think, where a lot of the advertising revenue growth is going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years.
What about the rest of the market? Other players?
Sony and Z, well, now they were talking and now there's been a complete breakdown, as we have been reporting. Else they could have also got scale. And honestly, the bigger picture is what worries me, honestly. Now, Z still has 16 to 17% market share. Sony still has around 8 to 10% market share. Now, if they could have joined hands, then they would have been a significant force as well. That is not happening. So they now have to individually compete with a gorilla, which has 40% plus share in linear television and 50% plus monthly average user share when it comes to digital. Not easy at all to compete with.
So fair competition, or rather what can be the lack of it, is a concern for the Competition Commission of India. It was a concern during the time the Sony-Z merger was in the works, and it will be a bigger concern now. Here's Shrivardhan Sinha, senior partner at law firm Desai & Divanji.
If you look at the now failed Sony-Z merger, which the CCI had examined in 2022, they had identified general entertainment channels as forming a subsegment. And the data is out there largely in the CCI analysis itself, which would tell you that the combined market share of Viacom and Star in Hindi GEC, Bengali GEC segments, Marathi GEC segments is quite high. And if the CCI were to highlight concerns regarding market concentration this time as well, it's likely that the parties will have to address those competition concerns in these segments and bring down their market shares. So I think these are the two sort of areas which I think may cause some complications for the merger.
What do you think the Reliance-Disney merged entity will have to do to pass the watchdogs test? Do you think they'll have to let go of some of their assets?
Look, one would want to comment on what the CCI ultimately comes up with. But if one were to look historically at not just in the media space, obviously there's been very few examples of something like this in India in the media space, but across industries, the CCI would ordinarily ask that, you divest some of those properties or some of those companies. And it's likely that in this case as well, like they had done in the Sony-Z merger case, they might well require that the combined entity sort of divest some of those channels. And they could even have other such conditions laid down, for example, where they do not enter into new markets or they agree for a period of time not to expand their market share, things of that sort. But I think probably one of the most likely outcomes would be to, some of these channels.
Sinha tells me that this is a global phenomenon.
See, Anirban, the consolidation of the media space is not limited to India alone. We have seen this happening on a global scale. and you have these large media companies, which are absolute behemoths, being set up. The merger of Disney and Fox and AT&T on the one hand, and Warner Brothers and Discovery on the other, have been two of the biggest media mergers in the past 5 years. And additionally, there are talks of Apple and Paramount bundling their streaming services. So these are examples of very large media conglomerates actually combining and forming even larger ones. And this is a trend which perhaps is also going to be seen in India, as I said, going forward.
Now, let's take a step back and see what the merger means for the customer. I mean, it really doesn't matter to them which company is giving them content as long as it keeps coming. But we've seen some sort of a slowdown in content generation in the last 1 year. For example, talks of a merger had led both Reliance and Disney to go slow on big budget projects. Same with Zee and Sony because of a merger in the works, and then the conflict, and then the breakdown. Even Amazon Prime has been very selective in commissioning new projects. I asked Arijit if the new entity will create a content boom once again.
Yes, there will be. But obviously, cash is king. So we will not have too many players commissioning content, but the bigger boys with the cash will be able to do so. So, I mean, I do expect Sony and Zee to struggle. Zee to struggle most certainly, because they are the weakest financially. See, some amount of discipline is good, because earlier people were buying content like crazy, right? Just to outbid one another. Movie rights were getting sold for digital. During COVID times, it works because people couldn't go out and watch films in theater. But now, look at the mega release of Warner Brothers, Dune 2. It's just about touching $100 million in the first weekend itself. That's a mega theatrical release. And mind you, Warner Brothers has a content alliance with Jio. So Jio, even without Disney, had already signed partnerships with NBC Universal, Warner Brothers and Discovery. Warner Brothers and Discovery, by the way, the same company, to increase their Hollywood content. So you already are seeing, the winner takes all kind of a strategy. And by merging operations, Jio Cinema and Disney Star, they will have an unbeatable market leadership within the Indian OTT with close to or little less than 85% of monthly active OTT user base. And that's it's impossible to beat that, right? 85% almost.
The last piece in this whole saga is the story, or rather the comeback of a man. A man who literally built Star, which became Disney's crown jewel in India. Someone who pioneered regional content and sports television in the country. Uday Shankar.
Now, who is Uday Shankar? He was the Asia Pacific president of Disney and chairman of Star and Disney India. He was one of the most influential media executives in the country. By the way, a former journalist. After spending over a decade, I think, building and expanding Star in India, Shankar was asked by Bob Iger, who's the Disney boss, to take on a larger role when Disney acquired Murdoch's 21st Century Fox. Bob Iger saw the potential, retained him, till Iger himself left the organization in end 2019. And Shankar quit a year later and started what is called Bodhi Tree, which is an investment firm, which has the Qataris as investors, which has his old boss, James Murdoch's Lupa Systems, as investors. So Bodhi Tree today is an investor in Viacom 18. So in this merged entity, they will get an indirect shareholding. But, and this is a possibility, you have a 13% shareholder, which is Viacom CBS. Viacom CBS is today Paramount. Paramount globally is going through a flux. So a 13% shareholder in Viacom 18 possibly could opt out of this joint venture called Viacom 18. And that might give Bodhi Tree, which is a smaller shareholder, a chance to up their stake and up their game. And the advantage for Shankar is that he comes with an experience which is, almost unparalleled in Indian television history. And he's taken big bets on regional television as well, plus sports, as you said. And regional and sports together built or shaped Star in India. So in his new role, he is supposed to be providing strategic guidance. But mind you, knowing Uday, he will be a hands-on vice chairman. This is his second coming. And he loves to work with a blank canvas. He's done that before. And with such gorillas joining hands, he would love to get his hands dirty once again. Now, he's a guy who built a past. Now, he has to build the future.
For a last word on what lies ahead for the merged entity, I turned to Dawood. He said that despite being a behemoth, the Reliance-Disney combine will have to play its cards very carefully.
I think that the question for this combined entity will be, where can we really drive revenues? In the past, one of the reasons that this deal has gone through in the short term has been Reliance's aggression when it comes to providing sports content and other very highly premium content at a very low cost, or providing it for free, and then hoping to claw back some revenue from advertising. So I think one of the challenges for the company will be seeing where it can make money. And I think it's going to be very difficult for it to raise substantial revenues from the OTT business. So I think a lot of the revenue generation ultimately will have to come from other areas. And I think partly that'll come from the overall advertising space, but a lot of that will also come from the mobile world. It'll be from extensive bundling. It'll come from driving up mobile data usage, especially for things like the IPL. You know, you can provide somebody free access to the IPL on their mobile, but in most cases, they're still going to need to pay for the data to watch multiple gigabytes of IPL content, and that'll help to increase your revenue at that point. So I think if I were to have my crystal ball, I think it's going to really focus down on the mobile side, and that'll pose big questions for Airtel and Reliance's other competitors in the mobile space as to how they can combat that on the content side.
Also, no matter how big this entity is, Dawood says that the challenges of the market remain a big leveler.
I think that there have been huge changes in the way that people consume media, in their use of devices, in the mobile-first nature for a lot of consumers. But I think one of the challenges is that consumers only change so much. And I think that that's one of the realizations that Disney came to in India. You know, when it lost IPL content, it lost subscribers. And that may seem like it's entirely logical, but in other markets, big providers have been able to cut content and not lose subscribers hand over fist in quite the same way. And I think when you see that you have to carry on investing in content to keep Indian consumers happy, then that's a warning sign in some ways for a business, because it shows that, you know, the content costs aren't ever going to come down. In a period where globally Disney is cutting its content costs and hoping to retain subscribers, I think Indian consumers have basically shown themselves to be pretty savvy by global standards, and that in turn is not going to change in the long term. So you're going to have to continue to compete on price. You're going to have to continue to compete on content. And fundamentally, the Indian consumer isn't going to change that much on those fundamentals, the non-negotiables, in the next 5 or 10 years.
So, between market dominance and market challenges, we'll see how the mouse fares in its new house. That's all for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Indranil Bhattacharjee and Rajas Naik. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, but we are trying to get you more stories in the form of midweek episode drops. Keep watching this space and following us on a listening platform of your choice. This is your host Anirban Chowdhury signing off. Have a good week. All clips in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.